Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is 4 Paws in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into Corinne by Rebecca Morrow. Okay, so one of the subgenres or like rabbit holes that I am on TikTok is ex-evangelical or ex-evangelical TikTok. And then because of that and the fact that I live in Utah, I am also on ex-Mormon TikTok. And we had something come up and there was something on there that really spiked my interest. And I figured I would just go ahead and do a deep dive into it. And that is Corinne by Rebecca Morrow. And you're like, okay, that's weird for that to be on ex-Mormon TikTok or ex-evangelical TikTok. And you're right, it does. It sounds weird. It just looks like kind of a women's fiction type, maybe romance book. I don't know. The author is where it gets a little bit intriguing, a little bit curious. And that is the fact that it's just a pseudonym, right? So on the back of the book, it just says Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym for a New York Times Bestselling Author. That's just asking for drama if you ask me. But of course, I had to go and do a deep dive. So there was a Reddit post that was talking about this book and guessing or conspiring that Stephenie Meyer is the author of this book that she's writing under a pseudonym. And you know, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? Stephenie Meyer is LDS, she is Mormon, and should she come out against the church, which this book is talking about a woman who gets out of a fundamentalist cult. It doesn't specifically say the LDS faith, but there are a lot of conversations about the similarities between what she's writing and the things that happen in the church. So if she were to come out against the church, she could potentially be excommunicated, which is a huge thing for someone in the LDS faith, right? So writing under a pseudonym makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of conversations about whether or not this is her, but I thought, you know what, we're just gonna read it. We're just going to read it and find out. So here we are. My background is from the ex-evangelical faith. I grew up non-denominational Christian, which was supposed to be the progressive Christians. But looking back on my growing up and my time in the church, is a cult. There are also a couple of people on the ex-evangelical side of TikTok that I follow that are also reading this book and have really related to a lot of the things that go on in this book. So I'm really excited about this. So here we go. Let's get into the book.
Hoping you'll love me once again. I know I'm selfish a little bit, and you calling love wasn't helping it.
Hello. Last night I finished about 90 pages of Corinne. It's basically the end of part 1, which was the first flashback from 1992. And I will say this book is extremely readable. It's very bingeable. The chapters are so short. I mean, there are some times where the chapter is only 1 page and it made it very easy to read, right? There are definitely parts in here where I think it could be talking about the LDS faith or the LDS church. When they're describing the church building, it feels very much like a ward. It very well could be. It's definitely leaning more towards the fundamentalist LDS rather than mainstream. But there are also parts that don't feel Mormon, right? There's some things that feel almost I'm gonna have to do some research on what the name of the cult essentially is. But it's Southern Baptist on steroids. It's the Duggars type of thing. So it kind of feels like a mixture of both. And I get it. If it is Stephenie Meyer, or if it is someone that's still in the LDS church, or is part of that, or any type of church, I get why you wouldn't want to necessarily make it seem exactly like that church, right? Because then you could be outed. And if there's a whole point on trying to make sure that you're staying anonymous, right? So I've started tabbing some stuff where I feel like it could be Mormon. Okay, so when they're talking about names for Enoch, they're saying, I'm looking for a name that's try really, really hard, not quite Zebediah, but close. Coming up with the name Enoch. So like Zebediah, very, very LDS name, especially fundamentalist. It also talks about it wasn't fair that the boys got jobs to do during church services. They got to take attendance and manage the audiovisual equipment. Some of them, the older boys, even got to watch the parking lot. Imagine getting to skip half the service to stand outside in the sunshine or the rain. Corinne wouldn't mind the rain. She'd take any job at all. Very LDS. Girls don't really do anything. They are called elder and sister quite a bit. That's a very LDS thing. But then we have this one where we're talking about how girls' hair is worn. No one cuts their hair, which is kind of LDS, but not necessarily. And then it talks about how girls could wear it down, but once you were married or too old for anyone to marry, you started wearing it in a bun or a tight braid down your back, which is not mainstream LDS. It is fundy, but not necessarily mainstream. However, like there are definitely other cults where that would be. It talks about how the church preferred married missionaries. They were more useful. That's not LDS at all. You go on a mission after you graduate high school for 2 years and you're not married. People at school talked about TV and music and movies, but people at church weren't allowed to listen to much secular music, and most of what was on TV was off limits as well. That's kind of LDS, but also other churches. But this is the one that feels very Mormon. You could get cast out for breaking the rules, for sinning and not being sorry enough. You could get cast out, and then the elders would decide when you were allowed back in, and nobody was allowed to talk to you in the meantime. It talks about Saint Peter, which is not really a figurehead in the LDS church. It's talking about the your conscience is like it was something that would get stretched out if you used it too much. Like after she had sex, then like she has this whole like purity culture like panic spiral, which is like could be LDS, but it's also other churches. So like I don't know what church this is talking about. So anyways, I don't know. I did go farther down the Corinne talk on TikTok last night. There are some people thinking that it might be Shannon Hale, who is also LDS, but has been more outspoken against the church and specifically for LGBTQ rights and I think also like pro-choice, which is also like very against the church. Stephenie Meyer does not write short chapters, so this is definitely a different writing style for her, if that is what this is, or if it is her. But I don't know. We'll see. I do need to go to work, so I'll talk to you later. Good evening. It has been several days since I've talked to you, but I am on page 250 of Corinne, and so I thought I would check in with you guys. What I'm getting from this is that it's getting less and less Mormon. There's definitely some things that just feel a little bit more like fundamental evangelical than like LDS, which one makes it more relatable to me because that's where I came from. But they do talk about like being in Arkansas or being in the Midwest, and that feels more fundamental evangelical or even Baptist. I'm not sure the actual word of it or the name of that group of people. That's just what it feels more like to me. It's feeling less Mormon. That kind of tells me that I don't think it's Stephenie Meyer. I don't think that she would have this level of knowledge about a church that's not her own to be able to describe it so accurately, if that makes sense. So I don't know, like, yes, it could be, because the writing style kind of still feels like it, other than the fact that like the chapters are really short. But there's some parts that are a little repetitive. There's like the conversations just kind of feel a little bit like her, but I don't think it is at this point. We're like a little over halfway through the book. And I'm not thinking it is at this point, but I don't know who it could be, right? Because like I said, the other option, or the other name that's being thrown out is Shannon Hale, but she's also a former LDS. And so I don't know that it's her either. So we're gonna have to start doing some digging, seeing if we can find someone who's not LDS or that like, you know, was more ex-evangelical maybe, and maybe that's the author. Because at the same time, the LDS faith is definitely one of the churches that would excommunicate somebody for speaking out against the church for like writing something like this. So it's possible that it was her. She is kind of writing about her own experience as former LDS, or as someone who's in the LDS church. However, she could be spinning it to, look more like evangelical by doing research through, reading books from evangelical pastors, listening to their sermons, things like that. All in the realm of possibility. I don't know. Coming back very shortly after, one thing that I think that I'm not enjoying as much as far as the reading is concerned now, I am really liking any time that we talk about deconstructing the belief system and things like that. Really, really loving that. Not so much loving the actual romance between these two characters. I really don't give a shit. I know that the whole premise of this is that it's kind of a second chance romance story, where they were lovers, friends who slept together as high schoolers, and then they're coming back, 15 years later, something like that, and trying to start this relationship while one person is still in the church and one person has gotten out of the church. And I don't care about the relationship. There's a lot of little mundane things about her making dinner and going to the grocery store and doing these things and being with her family and and whatever, and I don't care about any of that. So that being said, I'm reading it very quickly, but that could be because I'm kind of skimming it at this point.
Okay, so this text right here is 1 John 2:15. I did the research. It's not only is it 1 John 2:15, but it's 1 John 2:15 in the New International Version or the English Standard Version.
It is not the wording for 1 John 2:15 in the Book of Mormon. And it is not the wording for the King James Version, which is what a lot of the cults use because it's the classic or whatever. It's slightly different. The wording has changed. Now a lot of Southern Baptist denominations and Pentecostal denominations will use the English Standard Version. There are a few that will use the New International Version. I know that this is probably too much information, probably not information that you are interested in, but it is further proof that we're not talking about a Mormon faith, but rather an evangelical. Okay, let's talk about Corinne. I finished this book last night, and I wanted to kind of collect my thoughts before we started talking about this. Let's talk about the book first, just as a review. I think I'm giving this 3.5 stars. I really liked parts of it, and then there were parts that I was kind of bored. I felt like a little bit of it was repetitive. In that case, it might be Stephenie Meyer. There definitely were scenes that I felt could have been taken out or changed, but they just were the same scene, just in a different spot. Does that make sense? But we're having the same conversations. The amount of times they go to Dairy Queen. And I get it. They're trying to rebuild this relationship that they hadn't seen each other in 10 years. I get it. But I just wanted a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more tension and more of the deconstructing. Towards the end of the book, as you can see, a lot of these tabs towards the end are just discussions of how they were deconstructing their faith. And I really, really loved that. And I wanted more of that. I wanted more wrestling, right? I think that in some instances, she only scratched the surface. Now, let's talk about my thoughts about who this author is. I don't know. I have no idea. There have been so many names thrown around about this book and who the author might be. Stephenie Meyer obviously was the biggest one. Shannon Hale has been thrown out as a name. Rainbow Rowell was thrown out as a name. I don't think I've read Rainbow Rowell before, so I can't really speculate on her writing style. But then John Green was thrown out as an option. So was Brandon Sanderson, and a lot of that is just because I don't know about John Green, but everyone else in that group are LDS, and they're New York Times bestselling authors. And I think that the public kind of latched onto the fact that this is definitely a Mormon who wrote this, and I actually don't think it is. I don't think it is. There are a lot of things in here that sound like the Mormon faith, but a lot of those also sound like fundamentalist Christian faiths. Some of those Fringe Pentecostal, even evangelical, type. There's a lot of those types that also, like, anything that was in here that sounded Mormon also sounded like these other religions. There was conversations of hell in here, and Mormons don't really talk about hell. I did talk about how she uses either the NIV or the ESV translation of the Bible when she's quoting scriptures, not the Book of Mormon. So again, like, these could have all been like decoys and kind of like red herrings to kind of pull you away from thinking it was the Mormon faith, and maybe I'm just falling victim to that. But I think she's talking about more of a fundamental Christian church, not an LDS church. Again, just my opinion. I am not necessarily an expert in this, but here we are. I do 100% think that it was a woman who wrote this. It was not John Green. It was not Brandon Sanderson. And the reason why I think that is because of the conversations about purity culture, and specifically the conversations like after they have sex, and just like the kind of almost shame around it, and like not like it is all from Corinne's point of view, and I just don't think that a man could have written that inner turmoil that women, specifically women that grew up in purity culture, had to go through or have to go through. So I definitely think it was a woman who wrote this, but which women? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. So I guess this video was not necessarily a success in the fact that we don't know. We still don't know who the author is. I'm still dying to know, though, because I just want to put that last puzzle piece in place. But yeah, it could very well be someone who like wrote nonfiction. It could have been someone like that. I do think that if you have ever gone through any sort of religious trauma, or you have been like dealing with deconstructing your faith, I do think that this book is kind of cathartic. It's kind of therapeutic. Is it a perfect book? No, not at all. I don't think that this is a perfect relationship. I think that there are definitely still some red flags here. However, I do think it's realistic. And it was a little bit, I don't want to say triggering, but a little bit like there were thoughts as I was reading this. We'll just say that. I do recommend that you pick this book up, especially if you grew up in a church or under some religion, whether that is LDS or Christian or anything like that, and you are starting to deconstruct your faith. I do think that this is really helpful. And not in the like helpful as it'll help you deconstruct your faith, but it's just like the therapeutic. Let me know down below if you have read this book. If you have, let me know what your thoughts are and who you think the author is. I'm so curious to know. It's an obsession, really, at this point. If you're not feeling chatty, you can do like the question mark emoji or the we don't know emoji, because we don't know. That is all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. And if you would like to hang out with me more, I do have my very own Patreon. We have a Discord channel and other exclusive perks. So the link for that is down below in the description, as well as the link to my Twitter, my Instagram, and my Goodreads. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.